Hey everybody, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. March the 27th, it's day 86 in your reading, and I hope that you are able to stay along with us with the reading. And if you're just watching for the first time today, start today. I'll say that often. We're in Joshua 18, and this is going to require, this is going to be one of those conversations that we have to work through, because this is not an exciting story. They're dividing land. You know, you go to the river, to the tree, back to the mountain, down to the valley. You know, that kind of thing. There is a preface to it, and so I'll read a couple of the first verses, and then we'll jump in. It says, "Now that the land was under Israelite control, the entire community of Israel gathered at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle. But there remained 7 tribes who had not yet been allotted their grants of land. Then Joshua asked them, 'How long are you going to wait before taking possession of the remaining land the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given to you?'" How long are you going to wait? Now, there is almost a contradiction here, it feels like to me. Because he said the land is under Israelite control. Mm-hmm. But then he says, how long are you going to wait to take the rest of the land? Now, I think we can theorize about that, and we might as well. So let's just jump off there. Why do you think he says the land's under your control, but you hadn't taken all the land? What do you think? What he's talking about?
Like, when are you going to finish the job? God had told them that it was all going to be theirs, and maybe they had become content with what they did have.
Yeah, I see it as the general geographical region was under their control, but the subdivisions of the specific allotments that were going to each individual tribe had not been made yet. And obviously, it seems to me like that is a frustration for Joshua, that this should have already been done, that they have been dragging their feet, and it appears that perhaps they are simply content. Now we've crossed over Jordan, we're in the general area we're supposed to be, we're not all that interested in finding the specific area we're supposed to be. And I think there's a real application of that in our life, that we can get in a relationship with God on a general sense, but we're not that interested in finding out the specifics that he wants us to do and where he wants us to be and what that needs to look like, because that requires a lot more effort and intentionality.
Yeah, and I think you can control something, but not control everything. Mm-hmm. You know, in recent weeks around this podcast, one of the headlines for news would have been Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So if you look at the map and you do much reading, so the capital of Ukraine is pretty far away from where these areas are. It's called the Ukraine, but those places, they don't have a lot of control there. You know, there's lots of rebels, lots of people who are ceding control, and it borders Russia. Russia looks to move in. So you can, even in the United States, I think there are pockets that it's the United States, but they ain't a whole lot of control.
That's right.
The violence, crime, even communes, you know, that where people live, and you know they've secluded themselves away from people and don't want anything to do with anybody. So you can have it. I think they had control of the land. They could kind of do what they wanted to, but they hadn't taken all the territory. And so it says, then Joshua says, how long are you going to wait? So the question that I made a note of is, why is it that we delay obeying God? What causes us to delay?
I mean, I think in their case they knew it was going to be unpleasant. They had to go in and push these people out. They didn't know how it was going to go or how hard it was going to be, and there was going to be a lot of violence.
Right.
Yeah. There's always a danger in being content where you are, that this is good enough. It may not be the best, and certainly in their situation, God said he was very specific about locations, and he wanted them to subdivide it, take possession, control it, cultivate it, all those things. But there's a real danger in getting to a place where I'm comfortable right here. This is good enough, therefore I'm really not interested. or even I have good intentions, but a week turns into a month, turns into a year. And rather than pursuing better or best, we settle for what is good.
Yeah, I see this in the context of church quite often. And I don't want to say every day, but certainly every week, and it feels like every day, I'm constantly thinking in terms of how and where do I need to keep pushing? Because the danger at my age, mid-50s, is we have a strong church, we got a good group of people, financially fairly secure. I could hit cruise until I retired and never move my needle a whole lot. You know, we may grow a little bit, we may shrink a little bit, but I could hit cruise until I died. But eventually the church is going to die, going in that pattern. And I see churches do it all the time. They'll have a generation come through who are anxious to do things. You know, they build buildings, they invite people, they have children, they start ministries, and then they get older and their kids age out of a youth program, for example. And then youth programs aren't that important anymore. It becomes more important to make it comfortable for them, and you know how they do things. And the church, it doesn't die right that minute. That's right. The thing. They don't die right then.
Process.
They can go 20 more years, but then they die, you know, quickly because they've not continued to press. And here, I think there's a certain level of comfort. You know, they've gotten into the promised land. I do think it's difficult. And the older you get, let's be honest, there are some things you're like, it ain't worth it. This ain't worth the trouble. And, you know, we got milk and honey flowing, you know. Why do we need the rest of this land? Let's just settle in here.
Yeah, and once you find that spot where you're willing to settle for a season, the longer you wait, the harder it is to get that momentum started back to moving in that right direction. That's always a danger.
But that's one of the things that made Joshua just such a good leader too, though. You know, as he's getting older and closer to the end of his life, he wants to see them complete what God has said needs to be done.
Whether he's a part of it or not.
Right.
This is where we need to go, and this is what needs to be done.
Because every one of these decisions are going to be generational. You know, it's not just about them at the moment. It's about from this point right on.
Yeah, agreed. So he then tells them, go out into the land and draw me a map. That's essentially what he's asking them to do, is map out the land. Why did he need a description so he could divide the land? Why do you think that was important? I know that's a really strange question, but I'm just curious. Why couldn't he just say, you go that way, I'll go this way, wherever your foot lands?
I think there was a sense of, on God's part and to Joshua, that we want to make sure that these divisions represent adequate space, you know, because depending on the size of the tribe had a lot to do with what they got, where they got, how much land they got, and that he wanted it to be, I don't want to use the word equal, we've talked about that word many times in here, but he wanted it to be a fair representation, you know, and perhaps some of it was more fertile from an agricultural standpoint, but it didn't offer so much of this, and vice versa, because he tells them to go out, explore it, map it out, and then bring me a written report. But I find it very interesting, he wants and requires all of that, but then they cast lots to determine who's going to get what.
Yeah, I got a question about that too.
Well, he also states, like, I want you to come back with your proposed divisions. Like, you know, how are you going to handle this?
Let's see how fair you're going to be.
Yeah, what do you think
Can
about
you work it out among yourselves?
Yeah, and perhaps if they brought something back that was so just out of balance, you know, that he said, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And he gave them some responsibility. I think part of the casting of the lots, and they know that's going to happen, is you're going to divide this. You go make the divisions. You don't know what you're getting. So that will protect from, okay, I want my group to have all of this. You know, this is the most financially beneficial section of the country, so we're going to make sure we get that. We're going to map that out for us, and y'all can have this, etc. Because if they make the divisions and you don't know what you're going to get, it's like if you're cutting a cake and you don't know which one you get.
Yeah,
You're a lot more apt to slice it equally.
And, there were representations from each tribe, so that they all got to see what the lay of the land was.
That's right.
Nobody could sneak off and get the best. Oh, look, I discovered oil. I don't know what good that would have done.
At the time, but yeah.
We're going to run our camels on. So the casting lots in general is fascinating to me in Scripture. There's a proverb that says it says we can roll a dice. The modern translation says we can roll the dice, but God determines
the fate or the end of it.
How it lands. It doesn't it seem like a chance, taking a chance, or do you think this is just how they accepted? Because even we see casting lots in the New Testament. Yep. They selected the second number 12 disciple by casting lots, right?
Yeah, you see it in a lot of places where lots were cast. And think about the high priest who, in his ephod, had a little pocket, and he had those little, and I can't even pronounce the two words.
I hear them pronounce something different.
I know, and but in essence, he would cast those things out, and depending on how they fell, would determine how he interpreted the answer from the Lord. And I mean, you can't get much more close to God than the high priest when we're carrying him up here right next to his heart. And so, there's some interesting things there. I think overall it points out whether you're trying to make a decision, you wind up casting lots, or you flip a coin. If your heart is pure and sincere, God can use whatever He wants to give you some direction.
Sure. Do you have any?
You can get the magic 8-ball in here. Do we need to build this? Do we need to sing this? Maybe. Just kidding, folks.
I guess it just brings up the idea of fairness to an extent, because you can't control that but so much how the dice are going to fall, and it's a way to make sure that everything stays fair, that they're not going to get this crazy provision of land like he said. And it's, there's less of a chance you can show favoritism that way, I think.
Yeah, I think it takes some pressure off Joshua.
Yeah.
By making the assignments, by casting the lots, because he's like, y'all saw it here. This wasn't any of my personal choosing and doing. I cast them before the Lord, and this is what He said. So you just got to live with it.
So if somebody said, I want to go to the craps table and roll dice, and God's in charge, so I'm just going to trust Him.
It's your money.
I mean,
when you come back broke, don't come crying. That's right. He said, God took my money.
I do think that we are so needy for signs that we will trust in almost anything. Yeah. And I don't want to demean, the terminology people use, but I hear people talk about God winks, or God showed up today, or God, and I do think He does. I wish I was better at identifying Him. I wish I had more of a spirit for that sometimes. But I think part of that is because we're so desperate for His affirmation. Yeah. That even things like rolling dice, we're like, oh, that was God, that had to be God, and maybe it was, I don't know, and maybe just maybe, this is kind of as y'all were talking, how I was thinking about it. Maybe the process was what was most important, and the dice was just going to take the guesswork out of it. And if they went through the right process, it's like, okay, so I got a dice. Am I going to move here? Am I going to move here? I'm going to take this job, or I'm going to take this job. Well, if you go through the right process, which we've talked about here numerous times, the process is more important than the end decision. Often, the dice just take the pressure off. So, last thing, and this is a pure speculation, I think, question that I'm getting ready to ask. Benjamin goes first. Why do you think? Any? Because he's not the oldest. He's the baby. He's not the youngest. Joseph's 2 boys are the youngest, but Benjamin is the youngest of the 12. But he gets to go first here. Any speculation as to why?
It would be speculation. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't have any.
You don't?
I really don't, and I didn't bother to go look. I made the note for the question because it just struck me that, you know, there's 7 left, 7 clans that don't have land. Why does he get, why is his first chosen?
Yeah.
You know, is that the way the lots landed? You know, is that, was he sure about what he wanted? Did he come back with a specific request? Did they decide it among themselves?
But I mean, if they're casting lots, it didn't really matter who went first. It was just going to be
right. It was going.
chance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
And the lots could have included the tribes named,
right,
along with the territories. I mean, we're not given that specific information other than the lots, and so it could have been a combination of the two. You know, it could have popped up Benjamin, and this is where you're going. And
I read that they speculate it could have been almost like this jar had the names of the tribes, and this jar had
the
territory.
Yeah, you chose one. That's a good possibility. You know, because if you read the Bible, you have to have some of those questions. Or at least I do. Why did he get to go first? You know, what was special about it? Did he win the lottery? Did he choose the land lottery? You know, was it a jar out of a jar? You know, or the dice or the lots that they had? Did they have 7 sides and you know 7 names? What was it? You know, clearly it's speculation, and that's why I said this is speculation, and I want people to note that. One, when you listen to somebody preach or teach, I'm just going to give you some practical guidance. I would prefer somebody say, "This is my theory. This is how I see it." Instead of saying, "This is what it means."
Yeah.
I almost despise that, especially when they're going off and telling me something that they can't support by, you know, except a newspaper somewhere that was in Minnesota. You know, and I've heard people, you know, take a text and then say, "This headline supports it." Well, no, it doesn't. And so we want to be honest with you here. When we read things, some things we're going to say are only speculation.
Absolutely, and sometimes, because you can go through a passage and read it today, you could look at it, study it, teach or preach from it 6 months from now, and depending on where you are, your viewpoint of that or understanding could be different. And so I do think it's fair at times to say, this is my take on this as I see it currently. This is what I'm gleaning from it, and not necessarily that this is 100% absolute what it is, and there's no deviation from that.
Yeah, I've had to come back and say, I see this differently.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the challenges, that we not become too comfortable, that we not allow ourselves to ease into positions that are not fully what you want. May we constantly be moving toward the place that you have for our life, our organizations, our families, the places where we participate. May we honor you with that. May we glorify you in the work that we do. And may we seek to do what is right in your eyes and what's in the best interest of the people.